Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is a live edition of the Jake Feinberg Show, coming to you on Power Talk. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today, and it's been a very, very heavy day. I continue to break down the rigid walls of thinking that crop up, and I do this through engagement with spirits who have learned to wind themselves down and slow themselves to a point of stillness where they are at peace more often than not, and this peace exudes from them without any verbal interaction. People are drawn to them, people are inspired by them because they walk a path as close to purity as possible, because they have a lot of power. And with that power comes a lot of intangibles and a lot of perks and a lot of opportunities. But if you're going to walk on the righteous path, then you have to do it with unconditional love, which is basically teaching, mentoring, and healing with absolutely expecting nothing in return. Yashoda, Devi, welcome back to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you. Such an honor to be back. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great. You know, I want to thank you also. Our first interview was on March 5th, and I mean, you didn't really have anything. You're just your spirit, and that recognition of that transmission opened a portal to me where I just started interviewing huge amounts of women healers, and I attributed to our conversation. You instilled in me an opportunity to get in touch a little bit more with the divine feminine inside of me, and I thank you for that very much.
That's so beautiful.
Did you play football growing up?
Did I play football?
Yeah, I know you were. My feeling is that you love sports, and you probably wanted to play with the boys. So I'm just trying to figure out what sports you really loved, and how you, if that was a time when you were able to access the divine masculine in you.
Oh, geez. Growing up, I have an older brother, about 5 years older, and he is super active, and I was always the girl that was hanging with the boys. And from a very young age, yes, my brother was protective of me, so they would play tackle football, and then he would say only two-hand touch with her.
Yeah, I love it. I love
it. They would build skate ramps, and I would be a part of that. And I grew up in a family, one side of the family is a farmer's family, and so every time we'd go to the cousins' houses, it was always some sort of competition. Depending on what time of the year it was either we were playing basketball or we're out in the pool playing chicken or tag or some sort of thing where we were extremely active. So I was sports is what got me through life for sure. And going into middle school and then high school, I was a complete tomboy. I did powerlifting. My coach for weights was really well known on the West Coast, Jerry Valutini, and he was like another father to me. So he taught me everything I knew with correct mechanics and alignment. I broke records in high school. I ran track. I played basketball. I did volleyball. I used to train with the soccer team just for the heck of it. And I was always that girl after school that was playing pickup basketball, at least at the YMCA with all the guys. So you were, it was like full on that. I mean, that's the Yashoda Devi. I'd love to play basketball with you. You still play a lot, or is it more? I don't. The really funny thing.
It'd be nice to get you back on the court a little bit. I mean, just to see the jump shot, or it's unbelievable, really.
I had always been quite an extreme personality, and so I would say until I started meditating in my late 20s and then hitting 30, my body was my teacher, and I was hardcore until I think I dated this soccer player from Europe, and one day he told me, "You really work out a lot." And when I thought, man, this guy gets paid millions of dollars to work out all day, and he's telling me I work out a lot, I realized I switched gears and I went completely to the mind, and I'm just barely getting back. Barely. My son, who's 10, has no idea that I have an athletic background. None. It's kind of funny to me.
Is there? I mean, it's not something that like his uncle talks to him about, or I mean, you were hardcore, so it's not like you're trying to, and you also used it as a lifeline for survival. So why doesn't he have any idea?
Well, I'm not extremely close to my family that raised me, so he doesn't have access to hearing those stories.
I see. I forgot about that. That's right. Okay.
Yeah. And as a single mom, the only one that could tell stories would be me, and my stories tend to be more about mindfulness.
Okay, but you know what? I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna bless you. I want to know a definitive. I mean, sports for me, when I would go to my summer camp, 8 weeks, one visiting day in upstate New York, and we'd play intercamps against other camps. And, I always had a lot of anxiety, but, I was a good athlete, but I didn't, and I remember one day, like my upper senior summer, I was like 15 years old, and one of these counselors, it was old school, these guys, it was not what it was today. And, he walked into the bunk in the morning. He's like, "Get up." He's like, "You're going on this tournament today." It was a softball tournament. And I was like, "Hey, Rosh, I can't do it. My thumb's not feeling good." He's like, "Pick up a broom." And I picked up the broom. He's like, if you can swing the broom, you're going to go. So I swung the broom, reluctantly got myself together, made it to the inner camp, and proceeded to, in the first game, hit for the cycle, like a double, triple homer. Anyway, we win the championship of the inner camp, and I'm just sitting there at the end. They're like, the MVP is with 15 hits in the tournament is Jake Feinberg, and it was just like, whoa, man! It was like a bolt of electricity. So, and it was a confidence builder. So, on the record, let your ego be in. Tell me about in any sport a time when you completely inspired on any field.
Oh, gee. It's such a backlog. That's hard for me to recall.
Okay, well, maybe it'll come during the interview, but I don't want you to be shy about this because I know here's where I'm leading into, and this is what I want you to talk about to the world right now, is since you were so gracious to engage with me the first time, you opened this portal to me, and now I recognize things that I didn't know before, and one of them is that we have a imbalance in many ways right now between the divine feminine and the divine masculine, which is within all of us. So I'm being that you were a tomboy and that you were hardcore, I mean, in sports, you pushed hard, you were competitive. There is an animalistic quality to sports. It can be carnage. I'm sure sometimes they didn't always two-hand touch you. I'm sure sometimes you took a shot on the basketball court. So the point is, what I want you to talk about now, to men specifically, is what are the divine masculine qualities that need to come to the forefront at this time in order for women to regain trust in the divine masculine?
I think what's happening, currently in the world right now, and especially, starting from our country with the anti-racism, the beginning of humility, that it's being asked upon to have enough humility to say, hey, I didn't see this, I haven't been aware. And I recognize that there's a way that I need to learn, and there's some ways that I need to unlearn, and can you help me? I think it begins with that, the humility to say, yeah, maybe I've been wrong, and I didn't consider these things. I didn't even actually recognize these things. And I think there's a softening between that conversation, whether it be a white and a black person, or it be a man and a woman, or any culture or religion, right, that has differences. And that we sit together and we really have a conversation from the place of not taking things personally, but literally listening. And listening is one of the most powerful ways of communicating. Somebody who can really hold space, and this is something I feel I'm in constant work with, holding space. Can I truly sit as an empty vessel that doesn't have an agenda, that's honoring who's speaking to me, who may be hurt, who may be wrong, and that I can fully hear and assess and then find a way to create unity. And I really feel, when we talk about that divine, feminine energy, it's just really acknowledging, seeing, accepting, and listening, and then coming together of where can we find unity points, because there needs to be some sort of compromise between the two in this journey of healing. And compromise doesn't mean continuation. When we talk about awareness, like how I parent with my son, being a single parent, it's really important. I speak to him from a place of, I'm the parent, and I can say I'm an authority, but I'm not over you, because we're in a relationship together. And when I'm working on things that are patternings that I see that have been unconscious that I learned from my parents, and my parents learned it from their parents. And it's something that I see that I don't want handed, to his children. I literally tell him, I say, hey, this is what I'm working on, and I'm not very good at it right now. And what I need from you is help. I need for you to call me out when I've fallen asleep, because there's going to be times where I do that. And let's find a way that's nice, that, ignites me to be inspired to either stop literally in the moment and lighten up, or move in a different direction. And so it's a call to action for the both of us. It calls for participation, that he's empowered to help me correct myself. And I think that's important when we're talking about the divine masculine and the divine feminine, that it's an equal participation in that. To me, I find that tremendously healing, to feel that we're in this together. And when you feel that somebody's genuinely correcting themselves, it's inspiring. And through the inspiration comes so much love and compassion and empathy, even when we do fall asleep to certain things that we haven't fully changed yet. So watching this beginning of what's happening in the world, because I really do see it as energy, right? And so many people want to talk about the earth and climate and how we treat it. And I'm like, well, we can't even treat each other nicely.
Exactly.
So we can't end racism. How can we end abusing the earth? How can we stop abusing animals? How all the dairy industry, the meat industry, we can't even get to that before it's human and human. So
Yashoda, you were the one that said it. I actually have only transcribed like the first 20 minutes of our interview, because there's just so much information and it's heavy. But one thing you said was, language is a funny thing. And I forget what it was in relation to, but I'm just going to talk from my point of view, and then I want you to riff on this, because you're talking about unity. And, over the last 9 years, I think I've interviewed people from every continent, lots of different countries, all over the world. I think language is a funny thing, and I'm going to say that one of the hang-ups is this word racism. I don't believe in racism. I believe we are all one human race. And what happens is, in any culture, that these biases build up amongst people who look the same. They surround themselves with people who look the same, who speak the same thing, and a lot of groupthink develops. These cultural biases build up so that when my daughters or your son would be born theoretically into one of these cultures, the stigma and the verbiage is already there, and that's what they learn. No baby comes out learning to hate. So my feeling is that when I hear people talking about racism, it's like that's just more division, because you're dividing this race and this race and this race, when we are all one human race. Some people would say people were born closer to the equator, closer to the sun. They got darker skin. I mean, some people would look at me askance. I'm just saying that I believe it's much more cultural bias than it is racism. And if we started looking at it as one human race, then we would move forward in a little bit different direction. And I wanted you to riff on how you think about that.
Your own state of consciousness, right? And you can go into so many different varieties of experiences. I spent time in Israel, and I sat and talked with Israelis and Palestinians, and that was in my early 20s. And what I found is, that part of the generation didn't even know why they were supposed to hate each other, right?
Wow.
But there's wars and constant killing going on there. You go into so many different places. It's all over the world. It's on the thinking level. It's a disease. It is learned, and you are correct. But, I look at everything from healing and from human development. So being compassionate, like if somebody were to walk in to work with me and they experienced racism and I told them that we're all one and that racism doesn't exist, that lacks empathy and compassion of the experience that they've had their entire life. So it completely disrespects and disregards the position that they're sitting in, right? So the truth of the matter is that in a thinking pattern in humanity, racism exists, right? It's a disease within thinking itself. It's been learned. It's been passed on. Just like anything else, I look at it as evolution, right? Each one of us is born into a family, right? We're born into a certain region, a certain culture, a certain religion, and it's learned, right? Half of what happens within us, being adopted, I've had an interesting way of being able to express because I didn't grow up around my genetics. So I observed things and learned things from my family that I was with. And then when I later reunited with my birth parents, there were things in me genetically I did not learn from observation. It just lived in me. So we have two things that are happening. We have a lineage through DNA that's handed down. So to say there's no racism, that DNA line has been handed down. It's a lineage. And it comes from slavery. It comes from years of the worst abuse that I can't even imagine any human being going through. So to say that it doesn't exist isn't true because it lives in us.
No, I'm sorry. Again, language is a funny thing, Yashoda. So I'm trying to say the term, bias, bigotry, hatred, those are words that fit. I'm not denying that people... But that word is only more to me if we're gonna have unity. Anyway, I know what you're saying. I'm not denying that people are seen as subhuman. I understand diaspora. I understand that people get upset with looting in LA. Well, I mean, the European countries looted Africa. They didn't want to come here. They were taken here against their will. They were stripped of their religion, the Yoruba religion. They were stripped. They were there. If in the States, at least, if they were caught with a drum, they would get their hands cut off in public. And basically, when they looked at them, Christians looked at them and said, "You are subhuman because your skin is black. You are less than." So they were stripped of their entire identity, which is, and we don't need to get into semantics. I know that word is, I just find that if we're one human race, then racism, that word, is simply impossible. But I mean, that's just me. I'm not trying to, it's okay. I don't want to deny anybody. I also have many friends, old, young, that are black-skinned and Spanish and Indian, and I mean, that's the point. Is in your ashram, Yashoda studio. I mean, do you have a wide collection of different looking people that you are seeing every day?
Some. I live in Boulder, Colorado, and it's pretty white based.
It's real white, yeah.
City. Yes, I'm lucky enough to have some variety of races, but I can't say it's a lot because I live in a predominantly white place. Not saying that you are coming from that different place. I'm just saying, as a healer, as somebody, it's like there's a child crying, right? There's a large, and the end result is unity, right? Those of us who have done deep, deep work, right? I always say, yes, there's unity consciousness, and that's the end result. We're all one. But right now on the thinking level, we are not all one. So when I teach transcendence and I give you a mantra in the beginning, you have self-hatred and violence in your own mind. You have separation and dualism in your own mind. This is happening all on your thinking level. You have some sort of where you've boxed yourself in with your belief system, and you have a lot of right and wrong that goes within your mind. And when I teach you how to meditate, and I teach you specifically how to use mantra, and you use it to a point that you go beyond thought, it's only within the constructs of the mind of thought that all of this exists. The minute that mantra goes away and the minute that thought goes away, we're one. There's oneness. There's unity. Why? Because your thinking's gone. Your individual thinking no longer exists. So for those of us that are in the spiritual community, or we believe in unity, whether we're experiencing it or not, the truth is, yes, that is the ultimate of our human potential and our human consciousness. Now, is that the truth of what everyone's experiencing? No, right? Because the minute that we come back in from that vast place of unity consciousness, we go right back into our thinking. And there lies identity and separation. There lies religion, whatever we've been taught. Now, the beauty of the yogic teachings, for those of us that have been in the practice for a long period of time, is that we've gone into what I call transcendence. We go beyond our limit of our own thinking, of our own belief system, of everything we've ever been told and socially conditioned into, and we move beyond that. And we sit in that daily. For me, twice a day, right? All my students, twice a day. They go beyond their limit of their stuff, and they expand into what you're talking about, right? We're all one race. We're all one. We're on a spirit level. There is equality, right? There is compassion. There is universal friendliness. There's infinite happiness and bliss and abundance. And then we start to bubble back into thought. And some of that starts to carry with us, right? And then we go back into some patterning. And so as we keep coming back to the practice, we're breaking down the system within our own minds so that eventually we can walk around with our own individual unique thinking and ways, and we can experience oneness and unity in this, what you're talking about, that we're all one race, right? Because my spirit's moving with me and through me, but at the same time, I can acknowledge diversity. I can acknowledge the beauty of diversity and the uniqueness of the different shades of colors and the different shades of eyes and the different shades of hair and the different language that's used to express God and the different literal language to speak to one another. We can appreciate that and we can see the beauty, but yet we can also see the unity. But we live in a world that not everybody's experiencing that because they haven't connected to that yet. So, to say that, that's the end result, right? I sit in the same seat as you. I believe in the same thing as you. I believe we're all one race. I believe the same thing. But being sensitive to what's happening is there's been an ignoring, a huge ignoring. When in my tradition, what we talk about when we talk about ignorance, it comes from simply ignoring. So when you go into a yoga practice, a meditation practice, kriyas, mantras, it gets you to stop ignoring. Stop ignoring, right? So finally we've hit this point in our country where we can no longer ignore, and the kettle is screaming, right? I don't believe in violence. I don't believe in the looting and the whatever, but I absolutely understand exactly why it's happening. You can't expect a group of people to be suppressed for hundreds and hundreds of years and not explode. So this is what we call a collective samskara. Samskara, no one can go asleep in it because we've all contributed to it in our own ways. I don't care how good of a person or how spiritual you are. We've all connected to it because it's happening, right? So here we are dealing with the karma of our country right? We haven't even begun yet. Racism is just the explosion that needed to come out to stop the silence. We haven't even gotten to what our country was founded on, the violence. How about the Native Americans and the massacres that happened with them? We haven't even acknowledged them in this yet, right? Because the first trigger point is that Black Lives Matter. And this is going to ripple into every other subject of suppression. And we could go to women, we can go to all, colors, backgrounds, Jewish people. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. It's an illness, like a virus that we have in humanity that we all need to take personal responsibility with. And right now, because it's a birth, it's ugly, right? You've been to your children's birth.
Mm-hmm.
Even though there's love that explodes into it, it's ugly, it's messy, it's bloody, it looks like a death. It's not pretty.
Absolutely.
Right?
They had their heads come out squished out, it's hard.
And they're not cute when they come out. They're kind of blue,
Yep.
weird. I mean, it's all weird, right? So it's the same thing. Right now we're in a birth, and it's ugly, right? And part of birth is violence, right? The woman, at least I was, screaming, because I did it with no drugs. I was screaming loud, like
Also,
an animal.
just for the audience, Yashoda was you just escorted everybody, told everybody to get the F out, and you were just like on your own too.
Yeah, I was on my own and until the very end of it. And yeah, I was, if any of you have seen pictures of Kali Ma, that's who I was in my birth. And that's what's happening right now. I just see Kali Ma in the world. She's got her foot down on Shiva, and she's got, a ton of heads with blood coming down. And she's destroying ignorance. She's destroying darkness. And sometimes that's not pretty. Sometimes it's rough. Sometimes it slaps you in your face. Sometimes it's violence and it's looting, because everyone's been ignoring so much that it's caused this to happen. So from the Vedic knowledge, there's only three things that are happening in nature. You have creation, you have the sustaining, and you have destruction. We've been in what you call sustaining. We've been in maintenance mode. This is what destroys marriages. This is what destroys businesses. This is what destroys pretty much everything. When you go complacent, you become content, and you just stretch out the sustaining until what starts to happen? Destruction. So our country, when you look at the timeline of it, we've been in the maintenance mode for hundreds and hundreds of years with, parts or moments of destruction coming through to fight for something, better, but then it goes dormant again and it goes into sustaining. So on an individual level, this happens, and on a collective level. And so we're dealing with the collective complacency. So nobody should be complaining. It's just like, this is what is. We all sat back and did nothing. And in our culture, all of us, white, black, Asian, Latina, Native American, Hawaiians, so many, right? We've had traumas. We've all grown up and had things. Even though I've had privilege, I had a rough time in my life coming up. And a lot of us have been trained to be silent. A lot of us have been told to be silent.
Right.
And it's so many white people who are such good people. It's like some people have been molested from the get-go. They've been told to be silent. All kinds of things have happened behind closed doors. Women in marriages and abuse that happens, we've been told to be silent. Don't talk about it. If you do, if you open your mouth, you're going to get it. So it's in our culture, and it's weaved so deeply in us. But it's like such a celebration of like, oh, somebody popped off. It's time. It's just time to get the ball rolling. Whether, it's the right word. Racism is the word right now. And so, and the end result is oneness. The end result is unity. The end result is exactly what you're talking about. Yes, we're one race, but we're not there right now. Not in our thinking.
Right. No, I mean, I guess that's part of what I'm just trying to do at this point is just push back against the systemic subhuman treatment of people based on skin color, and because it really is deep embedded in a bureaucracy which doesn't really adhere to transcending or ascension in spirit. And did you grow up with parents or in that family that looked down on people of different skin color?
Yeah. My father came from a poor family that was a farmer's family. I don't know a ton about their backgrounds, but he came from no religion, and which is kind of nice because he's a really lovely man, and finding his connection to source, which when he married my mother was Catholic. And so he really educated himself in a lot of ways and kind of had a rough going in life and learned a lot of hard lessons. But my mother came from a lot more privilege. Her family, did well in the farming industry, and we went round and round. It was very much the black sheep in my family. I actually, as a white woman, I never dated a white man until I was in my mid-20s. I only dated those of other cultures.
Wow, that must have really made your parents happy.
It rocked the house.
Wait, so I mean, I knew this because I knew. So anyway, but you were doing that because you loved differentiation, or were you doing it because?
Well, it's interesting. I've reflected a lot because I was adopted. I feel like I never fit in anywhere. I always felt like the outsider looking in. And because I grew up moving around a lot and I went to 13 different schools, I had a rough time. I had a rough time because I appeared to be beautiful. Then the women were always jealous and wanted to attack me. And I was always in this weird place. And so for me, what I've always been attracted to is tribe. And what I've always been attracted to is culture. And because I was an outcast and those of color were outcasts, we related to each other.
Wow.
And I always really found it to be so beautiful that there's soul, like they're searching for soul. The music has soul. The movement and dance has soul. And in that, what I always loved with all of my black friends is that everybody's your brother and sister. So, like, growing up in the town that I grew up in, they'd be like, "What up, bro?" But, say all of these things. And then I'd walk away and I'd be like, "Are they actually your family, like your bloodline?" And they'd be like, "No, they're not, but that's my bro. That's my sister."
Exactly.
And in that, that's what I'm attracted to, this inclusive nature of, like, they always had each other's backs. They always took care of one another, whether you were related through blood or not. You were just related because you have the same color skin. You thrived together. And so in that, I spent my once I started dating, around culture. I was always usually the only white girl in the room and observing what was being said. A lot of times it was uncomfortable because they would forget that I was white and didn't speak very nicely about white people, and then they'd have to remind them. There was a lot of times just hearing where their hurt and their pain and seeing a different side. And then again, I partially grew up in Salem, Oregon, so I had lots of...
You did? Are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh my God, dude, that is I can't believe that place, man. That's a beautiful place, but go ahead.
But dating outside of being white, my mom literally, we had discussions where I'd just break her down. I mean, we would have wars, and I would call her out and say she was racist, right, with the timing of where she was born and what she was taught, and we'd get to a place where I could start to have empathy of where she was coming from. And a lot of times she would end conversations where if I was going out to do something with my boyfriend, that she would just cry and say, well, I fear for your guys' lives because there's a lot of white supremacy around here. You guys might be killed. And I would say, well, then I don't really care because I'm going to love who I'm going to love. So, there was an inward battle, but at the root of it, I could always see, even though my mom had racism in her heart is not racist, right? So, in her deepest self, I know that she's coming from love, but she's also been trained in this different way. And it's hard to dismantle that older generation with, I think a lot of it with, and this might not be popular, but with the Christians, the church.
I mean, they are the ones that, they're the ones that looked at the slaves and said, you're not Christian because you're subhuman, and if you were Christian, you'd have white skin. So it's absolutely, and then of course there's blanket offense taken by all people that of all denominations of I'm not well versed in all the denominations, but it's this sort of selective grievance, and Yashoda, I wanted to put this audio clip in for you. It's a story from one of my interviews. I want you to listen to it, and then we'll come back.
Okay.
I had been seeking for years, ever since when I first started playing bass in 1962, or at least a couple of years after that, and why I was playing music. What was the reason for it? Because it wasn't enough for me just to have fun and enjoy it. I wanted to. I wanted to know why I was playing, and what prefaced that was there a God that created us all? Was this, what was my life all about? So I started investigating and pursuing, reading different books and just talking to people and to find out if there really was a God. And I became confused by man's opinions. I became confused by the vanity and my egos and just the intellectualism and the way we do to try to puff ourselves up and make ourselves important in life, that power. And so I just start praying. And it says, if there really is a God, reveal yourself to me and make yourself known. I can't deal with the intellectualism. Everything's becoming just too perfect and precise, and too much vanity and ego. And so if you're there, reveal yourself to me. So slowly but surely, the Lord started revealing and making things clear to me. And on this path, part of the process was finding out why I was playing music. What's the reason for this? I thought, well, if there is a God, then that God created music. If there is a God, then that God created me and put the desire in me to play music and gave me the love for music. So I thought, well, my first responsibility then would be to find out if there is a God. It made sense to me. It's like going to the very root, of it all. So that was my first.
You did it on your own, though. You were.
Yes, I did this on my own.
Yeah,
right.
It's very beautiful.
I didn't want to belong to a group and be under the religiosity and the traditions of the church, and it just gets bogged down with bureaucracy.
No, I really dig it. I dig it so much.
I wasn't interested in that. Anyways, in answer to your question, I had to preface my answer to your question a little bit, just give you a little background. But
Sure.
There was a two issue of 2 issues of Cadence magazine from 2005. I think it was the May and the June issue that William Minor did like a 7-8 hour interview with me in New York. And there was so much information, Cadence had to bring out a 2-part interview. And I talk a lot about this in that article in Cadence. There was a coffee house I had called Selah in Portland, Oregon, back in the 70s. And I had been living on a farm prior to that. I moved from Seattle to a farm in Woodland, Washington, and so I drove a tractor for a year, planted seeds to raise hay that we used to feed the cattle. It was a cattle ranch. It was my dad and his brother's ranch. So my wife and my son Scotty and Devi, we only had 2 kids at that time, lived on the farm for a year. And I was driving a tractor, and one day this plan for a puppet show. When I was a young kid in grade school, I had puppet shows for the kids, and I would do these little puppet shows. So I hadn't thought about this for years. I'm driving a tractor, and all of a sudden into my mind pops a plan to make a puppet house for puppet shows. And all the plans came into my mind. I went down to the lumber yard and bought all the things I thought I needed. I had written nothing down. Actually, when I finished making this puppet house, I had like a 6-inch piece of 2x4 left. So I actually got just the right amount of wood. It was a puppet house that you could stand up in. It had a folding roof. It was a collapsible, and it was painted purple and yellow and some other colors. It was really bright. It was for kids. And when I finished it, my wife says, "What are you going to do with this?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." I said, "I guess put it in the barn. I have no use for it." At that time. So I put it in the barn. A couple of years later, I was hunting for a place to have a coffee house, like the Longland in Seattle. And to make a long story short, I found a place. I was a lawyer in town that owned this building that was full of junk. He says, "If you can clear this out, you can." He says, "I'll just give it to you rent-free. And you can go to my lumber yard and charge whatever you want and fix it up, and you can just have it rent-free. I'll let you use it." So I got a junker to come and take out all the junk, and as a reward, I gave him like 2 or 3 oak tables, antiques that were in the place, and he cleared everything out. And then I spent a year on my own tearing down a wall and putting up a ceiling. I worked in there for a year to get this place together. And when I had the stage finally built, I says, "Oh, I'll have puppet shows for the kids on Saturday afternoons." And when I brought the puppet house and put it on the stage, it fit perfectly. It was just 6 inches shy of hitting the top of the ceiling. It was just perfect.
Wow.
Perfect. So then I said, "Oh yeah, then that's why I built that puppet house." And so I had this thing for the kids, and the shows behind the dialogue, I'd have Coltrane or Miles playing underneath the dialogue, so there was always jazz playing. And it was a coffee house that was free for people. They had a donation box, and people could come in, and I'd have my group in there playing on Friday nights started at like 1 in the morning till about 4 or 5. And it was isolated, so it didn't disturb the neighbors or anything. And, Jimmy Witherspoon and Charlie Hayden and Ralph Towner and different people, when they were in town, they'd come by the coffee house. So it became quite a great place to be for after hours. And when I finally went on the road with Joe Henderson, I had to give it up because I started traveling a lot, and I couldn't run it anymore. But in this coffee house, I would plan my puppet shows for that following Friday, and I'd write the script down. Well, one day I was in the midst of writing the script, and all of a sudden, I saw this vision. Now, it wasn't a vision where everything outside of me changed. It was a vision inside. But it was very real, and I saw this pool. It was a color pool, which is the name of my publishing company, and which was the name of my very first CD that came out on Muse Records. But Joe Fields at the time let Stardance kind of run interference, and then he brought out Color Pool. But Color Pool was the very first CD, not Stardance, the first recording. Anyways, I saw this beautiful pool filled with all these colors, and it's difficult to describe the colors because they were spiritual colors. They aren't like reds, yellows, blues like we see here on Earth. They were different colors. I can't really explain. And how do I know they were colors? Well, that's a good question, but that's the best word I can come up with to describe the radiance and the beauty of it. And I saw the Lord dip in a ladle and let these colors flow out, the substance. And I said to the Lord, I said, what is this? He says, this is a color pool I've given to you to fill the note. And the Lord went on to show me that the note, the musical note, in the world, you know, people will carve illustrious designs on the note, which is technique and a type of creativity, and then they put the notes in patterns, which is concepts, whether it be Western music or jazz or whatever, and they send it out to the world for people to hear. Well, the Lord says, I want you to take and fill the notes with His substance. And this substance is my love. And I want you to go forth and show the glory of the kingdom of God, not for your glory and not by your power, but for my glory and from my power, which took all the glory away from me. I mean, I couldn't say, okay, this is me, I'm doing it, I'm great. It wasn't about that. And so I had to give that part of it up. I couldn't follow that path. And that was the purpose. And I found my purpose for playing music. And once I had my purpose, I was able to move forward in a confident way, knowing, because my faith in the Lord became strong at that point. And there's a scripture in the Bible that says faith comes by hearing and hearing by the Word of God. So my faith grew as the Word of God became more prevalent in my life. And so I was able to move forward. I mean, think about, I look at it, and it really is like I was walking on water, literally. I was married. I had, now at this time, 4 children. 3 sons and a daughter. My wife didn't work. She was doing homeschool, and I was supporting a family playing jazz acoustic bass. Not like I wasn't playing electric bass. I wasn't playing any kind of gigs other than jazz. That's all I was doing.
Yashoda Math, thank you so much for sitting through that story. That was a bass player, very good friend of mine, David Friesen, and you know, when I see you and I see your eyes and I see into you in the pictures with your Guruji, I see a color pool, spiritual color pool. And I wonder if you, even though you might have been conditioned that there was a God and he had a name and it was definitive and it was rigid and nobody looked happy and you're like, where's the happiness? And through it all, I wonder if the ladle of your Guruji ever splashed the color pool on you early on. Did you have visions of that prior to taking your truth to India?
To spirit at a very young age. I was a magnet for people, strangers, to walk up to me and pretty much tell me all their darkest secrets.
Wow.
And
How old were you? Like 4 years old?
I mean, starting really young.
Wow, incredible.
Really young, and then my whole life. And I just started to notice the theme of, I was always, the child that everyone called, the old soul, and she's so wise. And my connection to seeking the source. And in that, I knew I was supposed to be a healer, and I knew I was supposed to find, that right connection. Now, whether I knew that it would be in India, I don't necessarily think I knew that, but I knew in the depths of me that I was supposed to be out of the box, not, to step out of what I had been raised with, and to question and to find my way in that. So when I look back at my path in so many different ways of just really being an adamant seeker, in the same way that I was a competitive athlete, that's what brought me to all the right places. And I do feel, even though I've had so much challenge in my life, I always seem to be at the right place at the right time, and I always manage to say yes to the right things. And I've been graced with so much, as the universe gives me so much and leads me. And I can't say because I've had so many spiritual experiences that have been packed in the last 2 decades since I found my path and my dharma. I did always know that my purpose was healing. I just didn't know how that would express itself, or what that system would be, until I found myself. And I resisted India. So,
really?
I resisted India.
You in what sense?
I faintly knew that I wanted to go there, and when I went there my first time, I had a rough time. I just thought, why does everyone love this place? I'm sensitive to smell, and I was like, it smells, it stinks. And
yeah, no, I did.
Everywhere it's dirty, because I've got a lot of Venus in me, so everything has to be beautiful. I'm like, it's not beautiful. And I had a really hard time. And like anything in life, when I resist, the mother of India just took me in. And in that, it was as if, I don't know, there was always some seed planted that made me come back, whether I resisted it or I judged it, and it just broke me down to start to see, the beauty in everything, and to find my way into the depths of the teaching, whatever. If it was a superficial reason that got me to go there, whatever it was, it got me to go deep. But I can't say that, I don't know if there was a definite vision.
You know what it is? I just see you in these pictures with your Guruji, where it's like there's like synesthesia going on. And you were there for a long time on a path of quietness. I don't know what the right word is. It was your truth, but after a while, you start to have transcendent experiences just through meditation and through your teachers. And I just wonder, like, if there was a point when, like you said, you kept Mother India would keep bringing you back to the source or the root, and no matter how much you fought it, and if there was like a definitive time when you surrendered and completely allowed that root or seed to flourish into Yashoda Devi Ma today.
Well, I would have to say probably it happened before I went to India. I can remember, I always call it my young life crisis. I didn't wait to have a midlife crisis. So I had a young life crisis, and I was about 24.
Yeah, no, I did. Old souls have early life crises, no doubt.
Yeah, I had one of those, and I was living in but I was in such despair. And I was going to this Catholic church in West Hollywood, and there was this one priest I just loved, and he, Catholic means universal, and I actually felt like he was universal. He actually accepted gay people into the community. It was in West Hollywood. He never talked badly about anything. He spoke so universally, and in that, I loved him. And then right around the time that I found him and I went to church every Sunday and was following that path that I had been brought up in, that's when I, again, found meditation. And the church that I would go to in West Hollywood, and one of my gurus that would come and teach in West Hollywood, it was like walking distance. So I would go to church, and then I would go to group meditation and knowledge meeting, and the sermon and the meditation and the knowledge meetings would be parallel information. It was like the universe just wanted me to hear sameness in diversity, right? Dynamic.
Right.
And so there hit a point where I was going to church and I was doing the meditation, and man, all these openings and deconstruction and awareness coming through. And one day I was in church and the priest did this sermon where he talked about divine will versus human will. And man, it hit me. Something in me just was like, okay, I get this.
Wow.
And everyone left the church, and I sat in the pew, and it was that moment where I was like, all right, God, what is this? What is this divine will? What is this human will? And I surrender. I totally surrender. I surrender my preference, and no more will I go with human will. I surrender my preference, and I'll go with divine will. Teach me what faith is. Teach me what these things are that you talk about, and let me actually live them. And that was my turning point. And truly, that was like the beginning of, and it goes in accordance to the recording that you just put. There's a point that hits you where you realize your ego has been choosing, right? Your ego that wants to get acknowledged and have identity and all of these things. And when you hit this point of surrender and humility, of show me what this divine grace is and move that through me and let me choose from that place, that's when you start to live your purpose. And that's when my whole life changed. That's when I started traveling. I started traveling with my guru. I started going to India. So any time that resistance came up, I knew that was my human will resisting divine will. It was that sermon in church combined with my practice of creating awareness and courage to step out of my box and to just go. So part of my practice was when you feel resistance, lean into the resistance and move towards it. And what I found that there was a certain point that I was resisting my purpose in my life in every area, because I thought from an ego perspective I should have something else. And when that stopped, my whole life took off. Everything took off. I just got led to the teachings deeper and deeper, and not just led, like literally gifted and handed to me. Great masters giving me teachings. I've had access to the teachings that no one else really gets. And I've been graced in that way. I've been graced, when you talk about the Guruji, when you see that picture of Pandit Bhaskaran is one of my loves, not my main gurus, but he's somebody who will drop everything when I arrive in India and travel everywhere with me personally. He'll go and pilgrimage into the Himalayas, even when he's told other people no, he will go with me. And there's something, we don't even need to talk a lot.
Right.
I just, being in his presence of his God consciousness, he shows me this divine grace. So, that was a pivotal point for me to hear that priest. I needed to hear it in the words of what I grew up with to launch me into the unknown, to start to have the courage to step out and make decisions. I don't have that. I just follow divine grace. And sometimes it shows up in things that I am like, really? You really want me to do that? Okay. Or it might be a tough conversation. It might be a way where I come across very Durga or Kali-like. That's hard on people.
Well, I'm waiting for that one. I mean, I don't want to be on the receiving end of that. I'll tell you that much. Yeesh. No, I mean, first of all, it's absolutely, I'm in tears because, I mean, that is really where the rubber meets the road for my show, is that you found your divine path and stopped resisting in a Catholic church, and you went to the timeless land of India. I mean, all deities are the same, and we have God within ourselves. I mean, I think that is, and I just interviewed Krishna Das for the third time, but I was, in preparation for it, I was transcribing my interview with him, my second interview with him, and he talked. So in 94, he was going to kill himself pretty much. He was totally strung out. When he left Maharaji, it was like he felt despair, and then, well, I'm sorry, when Maharaji died, he felt despair. He had lost his teacher. And I know that that's something, when your original Guruji, you have to come to peace with. They're always with you, okay? But, he got this bolt, flash message saying, if you do not chant with others, then you will never clear out the dark corners of your heart. And so it all became clear to him. So he begins to chant, and he is a charismatic person. And he begins to see that people love to chant with him, and they are very attracted and drawn to him. And he is at the beginning of this path, and he is a hungry man, and his words, that needs to eat. So in all forms, this adulation or fame or being propped up as some sort of whatever, horrified him. It horrified him because this was not the pure, the truth of what Maharaji had basically given to him, which was you need to chant with people to help heal people. Here he's looking at all the accoutrements, all the dangling, all the stuff that goes on within the community of spirituality that you know all about. And what happens is that, as you know, I don't think it's not gender specific. It goes both ways. It's just, so 94 that comes, then he's getting very irritated because I don't know if he maybe gave in to some of these things or whatever, but he stopped chanting. And in 95, he went back to India, and he, inside told Maharaji, I can't do anything about this. I need you to fix this. I can't, if you don't fix this, then I won't sing. I can't sing. All right. And he was there for like 3 months. And towards the end of the 3 months, kind of what just happened in the church after that sermon, Maharaji changed everything. All of a sudden, Krishnadas said it was like being taken from the valley, or only being able to see in the valley, and being taken to this mountaintop, the highest mountaintop, where the vision was so wide and so clear and so pure that the habitual nature stuff fell away. And he never really looked back after that. But there was this period of time in his cultivation as a chanter and as a healer where he did have an issue succumbing to all the superfluous stuff that comes with being someone that people are in awe of. And I believe that I know, because I've interviewed some of your students who are head over heels for you, and I know that you've had people come to you from an earliest age seeking wisdom, telling you stories, all the other stuff, and I wonder if there was a time in your early once your Guruji said it's time for you to go and do your work now, and when you came back and started to establish a business, livelihood, did you succumb to some of the non-essential stuff, and if so, how did you self-correct?
I mean, this is interesting because I come from a tradition that's really about honoring spirituality and abundance, that they go hand in hand. I think for myself, in my 20s, I can remember sitting in my therapy sessions, talking to my therapist, saying, I don't have a fear of failure. I have a fear of success. I have a fear of, people seeing me, and that there are going to be some that want to tear me down. And there's in me, the way that I am made, there is something that doesn't let me go to the extreme end of the superficial.
That's been there since you can remember.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking Vedic astrology, my guru, who is a Jyotish, a Vedic astrologer, I have a very strong Saturn. And Saturn is Shiva, basically. He's like the yogi in the cave. He's the loner. He's by himself. He doesn't have anything. And I have very strong Saturn in my chart, along with an extremely exalted Sun and massive Venus. So there's a little bit of a massive dance between my Shiva and Shakti, and it's my Saturn won't let my Sun or my Venus go in a direction of, as my guru would always say, being perverted, going in the direction of narcissism or the direction of misuse and abuse. I'm not designed that way. Even if I tried, there's too much Saturn in me. It would slap me down from the inside out.
Wow.
I kind of err on the side of, I probably, as my Jyotish always says, you're like the queen who likes to walk out, speak to her people, and go back and be by herself and spend all of her time by herself. So I kind of err on the other side. And if you see me stepping out, it's because I'm probably pushing myself in that way because,
yeah, I mean, you have an introvert. I think it's fantastic. I think you're lucky.
I do it made me very frustrated when I was younger because I'd walk around in Los Angeles, and when I was really lost and I didn't know, where to put my energy, it was just constant. Anywhere I travel in the world, people would walk up to me and say, "Are you famous? Who are you? Can I take a picture of you?" And I was always so frustrated because I wasn't famous and I wasn't anybody. And I would always be like, what the hell? Like, come on, God. Like, why do you give me this magnet and I don't even know what to do with the magnet?
Wow.
And so in that sense, when I had that moment in the church, it's just when Dharma starts to run through you and your purpose, like, yes, I like to live a nice life and I like to drive a nice car, and I don't shun myself of those things. I don't have an agenda when I'm teaching. All I care about is that you heal. All I care about is that you become liberated within your mind. All that I care about is that you end your own suffering, and all that I care about is that unity is being created and justice is happening in the world. And ultimately, I feel blessed, and there's a part of me on the inside that's like, oh my God, I can't even believe I'm making money off of doing this. But I also see that the teachings are supreme, and energy is what money is. Energy is an exchange, and when things are given for free, people don't do them. They don't show up to them. They don't value them. So we have a system that we're still using, and I'm aware of that. So it's dancing a nice dance. I think there's a in the spiritual world of really starting to understand when you step into your power and you step into your dharma, all resources come. Lakshmi comes. All support of nature comes. You can't help but be taken in it to the so much, but he had so little. The man had 2 silk wraps, some wooden shoes, and a neem toothbrush, and he never even slept in a bed, but he would stay in 5-star hotels. He was flown on private jets. He was flown on helicopters, which people, will talk badly about. But he used them as resources, and resources are power. And he had a mission to get as many people as possible to transcend their minds. He knew the power of what he was teaching with meditation. And in that, he was wise. He used his resources. Never do you shun them. That would be like telling Lakshmi, go away. I don't want you because I'm not supposed to have you. That's disregarding the nature of whatever you want to call it, God, the source, the universe that's bringing you these things, right? So each one of us has a different magnetism. Some of us will reach hundreds, some will reach thousands, others will reach millions. And it doesn't really matter what the quantity is. It's just a matter of what's your impact within that.
Wow. Poetry you're on fire right now.
Thank you.
I mean, well, but I mean, okay, so that's profound but you do have the Durga warrior. I mean, I cannot think, I mean, do you think, I mean, I couldn't live in Boulder. I couldn't afford to live there, but also because of what David talked about in that clip, the vanity, man's view of God, the divine. And do you think that there is, maybe is it just me in a bubble, or is it prevalent that people, is it a problem that people abuse their power and use it for nefarious reasons, or is it really an outlier and there are mostly snow queens like yourself who come and heal and then go back to your palace?
I mean, I think we're all here on a different journey, and I believe in, we're eternal, so that means we have many lifetimes. Yes, I have this body once, but I'll have another one, right? And in that journey, our soul, our Atman is eternal, and we're evolving. It's not just this lifetime. We're evolving for eternity, right? And so when we put it into the context of the teachings, right, there's some of us that come into this life, and our lessons are, what we would talk about with the root chakra. We're stuck in survival mode, and everything is from, searching for water and food and shelter, are very, very basic needs, right? And we might have a lifetime where we struggle with that. And we have a lifetime of being homeless. We have a lifetime, I don't know, of poverty, whatever that is. And that's a lesson within our lifetime that we move through, right? And we find stability within that. And then we go into the next chakra, and that's where we start to experience whatever traumas or abuses that we've had. But we really start to activate. We move out of victimhood, right? So there you can see a lot of people that come into this life and they get stuck. Like, man, they just have so many stories. Your heart goes out to them, and it's constant victimhood and trauma.
Right.
And there's no judgment. This is the report of the consciousness and the soul. This is what they're learning in this lifetime. Right? And so, sometimes they'll come out of the victimhood and they'll heal their trauma, and that's where the greatness starts to rise. Then we have our third chakra, and our third chakra is where our power is. And that's where we can get lost in greed, and we can get lost in money and power and using our leadership for agenda and the me, I, right? We're imbalanced in that way. But once we balance in that, right, that third chakra, we start to empower ourselves. We start to move when those lower triangle, which is the divine feminine energy, the lower triangle energies. When we heal those three chakras, people will say like the fifth dimension, right? And in that place, there's different layers of what we awaken to in that. And that would be like the first level is where somebody starts to experience love from the inside. I'm experiencing, so a lot of meditators, people when they sing in bhakti, that's when they feel the love that's eternal from the inside. And they go, oh my God, love felt. And then that's where somebody on the path is like, oh, this whole world's stupid and everyone out there is horrible, but I'm just going to sit here and do my practice, right? It's because they're experiencing love felt, but they're not expressing love. They haven't gotten to that level yet, right? And then there's the next level where somebody starts feeling the love and they're established in love felt, and they feel it so much that you now can express it without agenda, mind you, because when those three first chakras are balanced, then you can go in and truly, it's like so beautiful in my community, with the men in my community, that we've had discussions. They just say, I just love you, and I'm not like, I don't want to sleep with you, I don't want to this, it's just, I love you, like as a human being, and we can say that to each other because we have no agenda. It's the most beautiful place to get to, that we can just tell each other, we can hug, we can be in admiration, but not seeking anything anymore. So that level of that fifth state of consciousness, which we call cosmic consciousness, is unbounded. It's universal. It's coming from this place that's beyond the me, me, I, and the we. And then we evolve into then God, right? This God consciousness, and we start to experience God as the self. We start to realize that we've been seeking outside for God, and it's just been sitting inside of us. It's our breath. It's beyond our thoughts. It's the energy of us, and we start to connect to the field of God, and we start to experience that. And then as we evolve to understanding Creator, and however that shows up to you, then we start to evolve into this unity, right? So, some people come into this lifetime, and their lesson, they misuse and abuse their power. And that's where they're at in this lifetime. Yes, is it frustrating? Are there nights where I'm like, why is the evil and the darkness prevailing? It just feels tiring these days.
Yes.
Right? But ultimately, they're the ones, they are born by themselves and they must die by themselves. And as my teacher always says, as my guru echoes in my ears seriously every day, how you live is how you die. Plain and simple. So you misuse and abuse power, good luck with your end of death and how that's going to work for you. Because the only one that you have to face is yourself. Right? Is it going to be painful? Do you have a hard time letting go? Are you resisting through the whole thing? Are you given a disease that is excruciating? I think there's a quote from Stephen Jobs about, I got all the wealth in all the world, and I did all these things, and I paid for all these people to do all this stuff, but I couldn't pay for somebody to go through the pain of my cancer.
Wow. Yeah.
That was right. So in that, yes, it's not fun when people misuse and abuse power, and none of us are perfect. There are students you could talk to that don't have nice things to say about me because their state of the consciousness creates a different interaction with me, right? So they have different lessons, and I have different lessons that are karmic, that will transpire, right? I'm learning till I die. I learn beyond my death. I'm eternal. So in that sense, each one of us is in our own journey. And when we can come into acceptance of that, and when somebody finally drops into the humility and their deep willingness to evolve, then things will happen. Otherwise, the rest of us are here to learn how to interact with life. For me, Mother Divine is how I see Divine Spirit. And she's got so many different personas, and abundance is part of that. And never will I deny my Lakshmi. Never will I deny driving a nice car. Never will I deny anything that I'm here to experience in this lifetime, because the divine grace is offering that to me. And at the same time, I always give. Everyone knows that. I spread the love of abundance of what I have. And to each their own. Everybody is in their own journey, and whether they're awake, that's up to them. And the rest of us that are awake, we're just here to inspire, and not through words, through action.
Or listening to Yashoda Devi Ma wax poetic about these really complex issues. Well, I have one more audio clip to play for you. I find that out of all the information that I've called, this quote exemplifies why we connected and the frequency that we're operating on, and epitomizes what we are trying to do in the world. So take a listen to this and we'll come back.
That no matter what happens world-wise with business or whatever, however you want to, say it or call it, what we are as people, what we are as humans, never really changes. I mean, we all have a heart. We all come from the spirit. I think what happens is over a period of time, or through culture and the cultural erosion and whatever you want to call it, our spirits and our souls get covered with a lot of complexity and a lot of garbage. That what we are as people, what we are as humans, what we are as beings gets covered with a lot of trash. But what we are, in essence, is always there, because it has to be there, because that's what we are. So, when something comes along, like something beautiful or something energetic or something that's inspiring, it rekindles that natural essence that's in all of us. And that's why you see different things happen at different times, because people are made of love. People are made of hope. And if there's an opportunity for something that shows up that illustrates that, then it plugs that energy into people again. So even though things look dark, or even though things look manipulated and whatever you want to call it right now, there's a lot of terminology. What we are is infinite. What we are is always there.
Yashoda Ma, that was a beautiful saxophone player, legendary cat, Ernie Watts. And I mean, that quote could have been done, I could have done that interview yesterday, but that was done in, honestly, looking at the date, June 25th, 2011, it's coming up on 10 years. I've been on my journey for a long time, and I don't need to tell you about being on a journey, but, to me, what he's talking about, when something inspiring, when something beautiful, when something inspirational comes along, it plugs that spirit back in and affects all the people that we come in contact with. And I just would like to say, I am truly humbled to have found you. There's a lot of people that even people that consider themselves teachers, life coaches, healers, and they're counseling people or they're trying to heal people, and yet they themselves are still wearing masks, and they're still shrouded in, well, like he was saying, that your spirit gets covered in that kind of garbage. And I feel like the most authentic teachers and healers are people that are willing to expose themselves and be completely naked and vulnerable to the world. And I applaud you for having to, for being on a journey that you took the insecure path, you followed your will, and it led you to this place now, which is perfect, because everything is perfect. And to think that at any point you could have conformed, at any point you could have given in, at any point you could have been duped, at any point you could have been traumatized, and you were to a certain degree, but at any point you could have caved in to the rules that society says you should live by. And Yashoda Devi Ma decided to live by your own set of rules, and you will remain on the righteous path. And truthfully, I look forward to our next transmission. I hope it can be in person when that time comes.
It would be amazing.
Just thank you for healing me. And I mean, it's been a long day for me. It's been a lot of cognition today. But just always know that you don't need to say anything to get your point across, and love yourself as much as possible every day. You've earned it, and you deserve it. So have a beautiful weekend, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you for your kind words. Thank you for your platform and your time. And it's an honor. So thank you.
All right.
And then to the next time. And if it's in person, that would be amazing.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely do. I mean, we might have to do. I don't know what your the coronavirus is like spiking down here. It's it's a difficult. That's not something we even talked about. So I'd just love to do another installment as soon as possible. But when the time presents itself, and just bless you, my friend. You are an embodiment of that quote of Ernie Watts, and we will inspire people to be themselves. So much love to you.
Much love to you.
Right.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
All right, you too, my friend. Bye.
Be well.
Bye. Long day. It's over, but it was worth it. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. We'll see you later.